All right. Hey, gang. Let's talk about some composition. Study a little bit of that, shall we? Just get my desk into a comfortable spot. All right. So, in talking about composition, there are a few things I want to go over. We're going to be going over some concepts first, and then we're going to be taking a look at some examples and analyzing composition. And then we'll probably go into a painting demo. So first thing, okay, we got that. Scroll that down. Zoom in a little bit. That fits great. There we go. So with composition, you've probably heard a few different techniques by now. I'm sure you've heard of the golden ratio and the Fibonacci spiral, and that's like the that box, and then the associated spiral as it goes in and talks about, I guess, the ideal composition. I'm sure you've heard of the rule of thirds, just talking about breaking down the canvas into thirds and centering or aligning your focal points along one of these areas of interest. In general, and I'm going to start this off pretty much every single time, is there's no right or wrong way to do art. Art is expression and should be done with joy and such, and whatever it is that you enjoy doing, whatever makes it fun for you. Composition techniques and these other things that I'm going to go into are really just tools for you to use as you see fit. They're not something you ever have to use. Your art isn't bad if you don't use these things. Your art isn't good if you do use these things. It's, just all subjective and whatever it is that you enjoy doing. So with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's keep going into that. So again, that golden ratio, Fibonacci spiral, rule of thirds, there's many different things that you can do. I have a little bit of a gripe with the Fibonacci spiral and the golden ratio. I see it talked about quite frequently as something that, you should do and is perfect and, really grabs the viewer's attention. But, you can get really good composition without having to use this. The golden ratio is a classical idea of composition, and you see this in a lot of older works. So it was definitely prevalent, but it is not something that is completely necessary. Hey there, Gunny. Welcome. Talking about composition. So there are ways that, you can go about getting a great composition without having to use specifically the rule of thirds or, the Fibonacci spiral, for example. If you have, let's say, a piece, just draw a little canvas here. It's all about intention, what you're trying to portray, what you're trying to convey, what you as an artist want the viewer to see, to feel, what message it is. That's how you can golden ratios, uniform focal guide, not all composition ought to be uniform, put it simply. Yeah, no, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Nothing has to be uniform. It is all about what you are trying to say and what your intention is as an artist. So something that would break the golden ratio would be a composition kind of like this, where we are utilizing a lot of the negative space. Now, this is just, obviously going to be a very quick example. Nothing too incredible. Something that breaks the golden ratio would be a composition like this, where, our focus is this section right here, and how we're directing the viewer to that is we're utilizing a lot of the open and, negative space and directing their eye to the focal point. And that's kind of all composition is really about. It's about how you are directing your viewer to the focal point. And there's many different ways that you can do that. It does not have to be done in one specific way. And the rule of thirds is pretty similar in my gripe with it, as far as people saying that you need to follow this thing. Instead of thinking of it as a rule, these are just tools. They're guidelines, nothing that you have to do. Okay, so let's erase that real quick. Talk about some other ways that we can get composition going. Composition, a lot of it is about contrast and how you're trying to get people, again, to look at that focal area. So ways that we can do contrast, there's light and dark contrast. So we have contrast and value. So we have like a darker square and then a lighter square. Let's do a darker square, slightly lighter square next to it. So we have contrast and value. We can have contrast and shapes. So we have like a lot of squares, rectangles and such going on along here. And then our contrast can be, we now have a circle. That's going to draw your attention to it. It's a difference in shape. We can have a contrast in texture. So again, let's just do more. Oops. Got some circles here, varying sizes. Got some ovals. One of these circles just has some texture within it, texture differently or whatever. Again, it's going to draw your eyes to it. Many different ways that we can go about composition with contrast. And those are not the only ones. There's many different ways that you can do contrast. Again, these are just tools for you to use. But let's take a look now at some paintings by different artists, and we're going to analyze their composition, see what makes them great, what it is that they're trying to tell. A lot of this composition and narrative go hand in hand. There is a book called Composition. What is it called? It is called Composition and Narrative, Artist Master Series. If you were looking for a good book on, learning more about this stuff, that is a fantastic book. Again, that is Composition and Narrative, the Artist Master Series. Has artists such as Greg Rutkowski, Nathan Fox, Joshua Clare. So I highly suggest that. But anyway, let's get into the rest of this. This first painting that we're looking at is by David Frasheski. Let me just go ahead and write their name real quick. So we got David. Frasheski. Forgive my bad handwriting. It's awful. All right. So again, composition's all about leading the eyes of the viewer. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, it can either be your leading lines, or your composition is trying to keep the viewer in the painting, or your art piece, whatever it is, for as long as possible, or whatever message you're trying to say. Maybe you are trying to direct them first in the painting and then directly out of the painting. For this one by David Frasheski, we're going to take a look at some contrast and some leading lines. The first thing that I want to point out is, what is our focal point? What is the main bit of interest for this piece? Well, it's this area right here. And that's glowing area with these houses and everything on this mountaintop. Now, we know that because of the leading lines and contrast that appear, or that David Frasheski was using in this piece. We have this awesome line here as it leads to the focal point, and then we have this circular motion in the cavern as it all kind of goes around and points back to that focal. We have these lines that are leading us, again, all towards this area here. And that's how David was able to accomplish that, by giving us these leading lines, showing it. And, the contrast that we have here is we have this dark area, this darker area here, and the contrast being this incredibly brighter, lighter area in the middle. To give things a little bit more interest in this piece, we have a contrast in detail, or in the amount of things happening in certain areas. The piece is sectioned off nicely by this mountainside here. On this side, we have a bit of a darker area with more going on inside of it, whereas on this side is a lot lighter, and there is less texture, less noise. There's not a whole lot going on over there. It creates this nice sense of balanced asymmetry. And that's kind of what the golden ratio, or the Fibonacci spiral, is kind of what it was intended to talk about, is that sense of balanced asymmetry. But again, they're trying to say to do it in a specific way, but there's not a specific way that you have to do things. It is just another tool. So that's David Frasheski. Let's take a quick look at another one. This is by Dominik Mayer. Write their name again. Dom in Nick Mayer. So the name of the game with all of these is, again, leading lines, contrasts. That's how we're getting good composition in these works. So the way that Dominik has approached this piece is we're having a lot of leading lines that are putting you towards the near center of this piece, the focal area being this area right here. Let's actually do it like a dark blue. This area right here. So we have the focal being that red sun, the person. We have a lot of these leading lines going towards them that are keeping you in the piece They're bringing you towards this focal area. Now, we have these leading lines, but again, talking about the different tools, we have a contrast. And that contrast being this, very bright, this very saturated red for the, moon, sun, whatever it is, that is contrasting with the very dark grays and desaturated colors that surround it. And we have these great shapes here where, we've got these really circular, organic, bulbous shapes in the clouds, in the sun, and then we have this very hard, defined kind of rectangular triangle shape here that contrasts with all of those more organic shapes. So this is another good one. And let's talk about Bruce Brenneise. Oops. Bren. Let's see. Okay, so how did Bruce tackle composition in here? What is the focal that we have that we need to look at? The focal point is this character that we have standing here in the middle-ish, kind of offset. An interesting way that you can go about composition, so again, I'd mentioned the rule of thirds. Let's kind of block out where the thirds are on this piece. About right here, right here, and about here. So Bruce was using the rule of thirds, or the guideline of thirds for this piece. We have the focal point that is slightly offset from one of the points of interest. We have another point of interest over here with this larger face that's hitting another section. And, this is a great example of using that rule of thirds to help, to use as a tool for their composition. And then we have some excellent guidelines used to point us towards that focal point. Now, we, of course, have this rock face that is leading us up to it, both directions. We have this section here that is pointing directly up and is directly underneath the subject as we're looking there. Have this nice triangular piece here that's pointing to the subject. Then we have these areas here. They're just bringing us along. We have these sections here that are creating just kind of like a nice little curtain feeling and kind of book ending or showcasing the area. Something that you can do with your composition, I had mentioned balanced asymmetry before, is having an asymmetrical number of things for your viewer to look at. For this piece here, we have a couple of interesting things that we can see. There's about 3 different points of interest in this piece. Again, we have that focal. We have this kind of rock formation being a third. And then we have the lit area here as a contrast to the darker section up front as these 3 main kind of components in this piece. And it's a good idea if you're trying to get that sense of balanced asymmetry, um, to use an odd number of things like 3 or 5, whatever it may be, uh, to create a bit of a scene for viewers to look at. Our brains like to see a difference in things, or we kind of hone in on them. It can be pleasing to look at. Can we have 2 more? Then we'll get into the painting demo section. This is a piece by Piotr Jablonski. If I'm not entirely sure if that's exactly how you say their name, but I think I gotta get a little close. And that is... Piotr Jablonski has a fantastic sense of composition. He uses a lot of contrast in shape size to give us a real sense of like grandeur, like a scale of things in his work. So an example on this piece here that we're looking at, we have, of course, these leading lines on the fan of, or the sails of this boat that are directing us right towards the focal of this person here in the middle, or in the middle of the leading lines. The contrast that we have in the shape size, our focal area is a very small shape compared to everything else. It's just this person here. And of course, the massive shapes that we have that are in contrast to that are, this sail and boat structure here is one massive shape that's, our focus is sitting in. And then we have, of course, this other shape here, this negative space that is pointing us in the direction of our focus and flanking this larger shape. And we have 3 separate things that we're looking at here. We're having this, this larger shape of the boat and the sails, this much smaller shape of the person. And then we have this kind of medium-sized shape of that negative space flanking and leading us. So these are some good examples of things that you can do. And we're doing this analysis section here before getting into the painting demo, just as a way for us to kind of cover how you can learn to look at things and observe things. Art is a lot about observing the world around us and interpreting that, how we see it. And studying art and others' works to see how they go about their composition, how they go about their artwork is another tool for us to use in our own work. So it's good to, sit there and observe others' works that you like and really analyze why it's pleasing to you, what it is that you like about it, what they've done to get you to view things in a certain way. Composition is it's building blocks in a certain order to get you to look at the work. And we kind of do this all the time. We just don't really recognize that we are doing it. But, recognizing that you like what we're looking at and analyzing it is really just a good way for us to be more mindful of the work that others do. And the last one that we're going to be looking at is a favorite of mine. This is a piece called Chernivog by the late Keith Parkinson, my favorite painters. And that is Keith Parkinson. Let's go. Keep that, yeah. All right. So, this piece, Chernivog, Keith Parkinson. I said it's one of my favorites. I love this one because of all of the compositional tools that Keith used in this and all the leading lines to really get us to look at the focal area. So what can we glean from looking at this? What do we see? So our focal point is, this person that's lying here on this stone slab. How do we know that? What are things leading to it? Now, this piece looks like it has a lot of detail and stuff going on. So we have first a good contrast of high detail versus lower detail. This section that we have here in the immediate foreground, this is all a lot of high detail stuff. There's really busy. There's many things going on, whereas the background of everything has a lot less detail in these trees, continuously going back to the very background where there's really nothing going on back there. Great sense of contrast. Then we'll talk about the leading lines. So in this gnarled tree, it is pointing down at our focal point. But even within the tree, we have a lot of repetitive shapes, repetitive lines that are going through and still pointing down by this tree as it's circling back around, going towards the focal. Got a lot of these lines going down and around, pointing us back. We have these in the foreground, these branches that are kind of fallen over, pointing us towards the focus. And it's kind of difficult to see. Let me zoom in a little bit. But we also have a spider web of roots and branches in the leaf litter here that are creating not only like the basis of the perspective, so like the floor, the ground, and how it's turning or how it's coming towards us, but it is still pointing towards the perspective or the focus of this piece. So we have here this kind of spider web like look in this foreground, pointing us towards the focus. And it's hard to see. It's very subtle. Some of these things we just don't immediately pick up on, but our brain kind of notices that it is still there and what makes things pleasing. You don't have to spell everything out for the viewer in order for it to be a great composition. A lot of things you can do very subtly. In fact, it can be a good idea to do that depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Viewers don't need their hand to be held the entire time. In fact, most people don't like and don't want everything to be immediately force-fed to them. Our brains do like a challenge and trying to figure things out. So we are looking for subtlety in our composition that are just directing the viewer without the viewer really realizing that they're being directed in a certain way. One other super subtle thing that I just love about this piece is we have a lot of these falling leaves here, but we have a certain section of falling leaves that is actually starting from up here and is following the curve of the tree as it comes down to our focus. See that we have roughly the same kind of curves going on with the tree, and these leaves, it's really subtle again, like the subtlety, but they are ever so slightly darker or more saturated than all of the other ones in the background that are more desaturated. We can still see them if we're paying attention to them, but they're not as pronounced as the other ones leading down. So these are just some ways to analyze some pieces and, tools that we can use in composition. I highly suggest if you have, artists that you really like, whether it be character work or, these full paintings or whatever, study and look at what it is that makes that art pleasing to look at. What is it that artist does? And again, bears repeating, all art is just for fun, for you to do what you like. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just what you as an artist want to convey, what your story wants to be. So let's go ahead and get rid of all these and do a painting demo. So for this painting demo, we're going to, again, just bring up another work or another painting or whatever by an artist. We're going to analyze it, and then we're going to draw out the composition and try to study it. And what we're going to be doing is called value composition, and then we're going to transfer that into like a texture composition and, get into different stages of analyzing the piece. So let me grab that real quick and bring it in. If I can find the picture, where'd it go? Okay, there it is. This painting is called A Storm in the Rocky Mountains by Albert Bierstadt. Another one of my favorite painters. Albert Bierstadt is a painter from the Hudson River School back in the 1800s during the Romanticism era of painting. The Hudson River School was pretty key in painting a lot of the West Coast and romanticizing like the Rockies and desert and stuff to get people to go out west. the thought of like this school of romanticism was really anti-industry, which is nice, and trying to connect more with the nature around you and showcasing beauty in the mundane of things. So it's something that I like a lot. Okay, let's scale this down a little bit. Actually, we'll bring it over here and we'll increase the size of our canvas a little bit. When you study composition, you don't have to be looking at these paintings of, the old masters. Again, just, look at and study what it is that you like. This is the stuff that I like, so it's the stuff that I study. But it is in no way what you have to do. And it's not the only way to study. So we're doing this analysis, and we're studying the composition and other things. Art studies, when you're doing studies, you should be intentional and specific in what you're doing to remove as many boundaries as possible with studying the art that you want to study. For example, if I didn't want to study the entirety of this piece and the different facets of it, and let's say I just wanted to study the value structure or the composition that way, we will do what's called a value composition study. And what that is we're just taking values. So again, that's your lights and your darks. So we're not really adding any hue to it. No chroma, no saturation. We're just getting in lights and darks, doing grayscale. And the composition study portion of that is by looking at the piece that you're trying to study and blocking out the different areas of value and studying how the artist set up their composition with their light and shadow. So the way that I talked about of removing as many obstacles as possible is if you're just trying to study the lights and shadows of a piece or, like the form of something, it is a good idea to just paint right over top the piece or, whatever it is that you are trying to study instead of trying to immediately bring it down and studying it outside of it, unless, of course, it is your goal to do that. Removing as many obstacles as possible for your brain in order to be able to study will just help you learn a bit easier by compartmentalizing the tasks and the aspects that you're trying to look at. If you're overwhelming your brain with trying to learn as many things or, every possible thing at once about a particular subject, you're going to burn out and you're not going to retain as much of it. So I'm going to take us through this step by step, through different portions of this study. I am going to be going through the study from a value composition study all the way up to finishing it off with colors and texture and such. And we're going to first do the value study over top. We'll move things down into this secondary space. and then we'll take a look at doing the rest of the study. So first things first, what are the different values that we are observing? We do see that in the foreground, it is a lot darker than where the focus is for this piece. The focal area of this piece would be this section right here. We have some other little areas of interest in the light, but that main area of focus is that kind of lake there, pond, whatever it is, and this storm that's surrounding it. Now, again, we know this based off of leading lines and the value structure that we see. The leading lines that we have kind of going off this direction here. We have from this direction here leading down, this direction here leading down into the focus, this area here in the another section of interest, kind of have circling us up here, bring our attention to it. So we know by the leading lines where it is that this artist wants us to look. So for the value section, you can use as many values or whatever range of values that you want, whatever best helps you. I'm going to keep it to about 3 separate values. So I'm going to have my darkest dark, I'm going to have a midtone, and then I will have the light. And we don't need to be super precious about this. We don't need to be uber specific. We're just kind of blocking out the large value shapes that we see while we're trying to study this and understand the composition of the piece. So again, I'm not blocking in like all of the detail. I'm not even going to bother blocking in these trees right here, even though it is part of, that dark foreground. Those trees don't matter. So instead, I'm going to bring in my second value, my lightest light. And I'm going to block in this section here. For the main focus. We have kind of an alternating value structure. Trees don't matter. I know, such a heinous and blasphemous thing that I've said. Welcome, Kier, by the way. Trees don't matter in this context. They do matter in other bits of context, though. But that alternating pattern, we have again over top. We have this dark. Now there is a kind of a tip in tool to use in composition or in painting or even in just like flat drawing, which is, making sure that our shadows and our lights are, big masses and that they're touching each other. So, for example, like this section here, this whole mass of shadow that we've painted in, all of that is one shape. Having our shadow section and our light section being separate shapes and then leading viewers through by kind of combining a little bit or having some things bleed into each other creates a good bit of contrast and depth in your work. We're not doing that right now for the value compositional study, but that's just like a tip overall. And then we have that halftone I was talking about before. So the halftone being here. So I'm just going to say that this whole section here, we do have lighter areas, but we're trying to consolidate and we're trying to simplify as much as we can our value composition, because it's not about every little aspect. It is about the large shapes that make up what we are looking at. It's actually... And lastly, is my color dynamics on? It is. I need to turn that off. Lastly, we have this last bit highlight here, which I will go ahead and utilize. So this is the basic, just, large shapes, not trying to get too nitty-gritty into the detail, compositional or value composition breakdown. Now, it doesn't look like much now that we've painted over everything, but this is the overall structure of the painting without getting into the details and everything else about it. What we have is a interesting balance of, these dark shadow shapes here and how they are contrasted with, the lighter shapes here. And even in the light shapes, we have a contrast between the halftone and our lightest light. In value compositions, you can use these 3, maybe 4, or again, however many different values you need to use to help you out. But we can use this to denote where our focus is in the piece. I like to use the lightest light as the focus, or as I'm trying to describe where the focus is. So that's something that you can do. Okay, that is the value composition breakdown. Now what we can do is we can actually just take this. Let's just slide it down. And from here, we can start working on the rest of the demo. Some areas I didn't actually paint all the way in because they're so dark already. The original piece I didn't notice. Okay. So the next step that you could take in a study piece, if you're trying to go the whole way, is now that we have the bare bones value composition down, we can go in still with values and start to add a lot more, detail in what's going on with this main piece. So I will just go ahead and start with, let's take you. Yeah, we'll just keep with this brush for right now, I think. We're not really getting into the texture at the moment. A wrinkly whale laughing in the Black Sea. Oh, I totally see it. Yeah, there it is. Yep. Yeah, the eye, the mouth, the void. Well, hopefully we'll be able to turn this wrinkly whale. Oh no, I'm actually, since you pointed that out, now I can see it in this piece too. Ugh. Gunny, why have you done this? Had I a roll of newspaper, I'd smack you right over the head for making me see that. You do help. You do. You absolutely do. All right. So we're going to block out different things. Let's get a new layer going. On top of that. And then we're going to bring our opacity down to about 75-ish%. And then from here, it is, now that we have our base shapes, we're going to start adding onto it. We're not getting a whole lot of detail, but we are going to be starting to get more specific in our shapes. So let's start with the immediate foreground. Okay, so we have, again, that line going through here, that's zigzagging to our focal area. I'm just going to take this, going to brighten it up just a little bit. You know, with studies, it's not meant to be perfect. You know, you're just trying to learn as best you can what it is that the artist was doing, or how they accomplished what they did in the subject that you're studying. Let's see, so it goes up about here, brings us down. Just getting some shapes. We can get more detailed and specific as we go on. Not super necessary right now. This section here. Gunny. The whale drooling. Stop making me see the whale. The whale is going to now start to haunt me. Sections here. Let's see. Let's get like another section kind of denoting over here. We have that there. Let's bring in some lighter section back this way for that light cloud area back there in the storm. You're glad Gunny doesn't ever analyze your art process? Well, why not? Gunny is bringing very valuable opinions, I guess, insights, perspective. Gunny is bringing valuable perspective by letting us know that there is a whale here, and it is drooling. And you don't need to do this breakdown like I do it. You know, again, there's no right or wrong way. This is just how I go about it. Yeah, Kira, you should let Gunny analyze your work. I'm sure he has loads of really insightful things to say. a little bit brighter as we go into this lightest light section. Their actual focal. And we're just going to kind of very loosely sketch in what we're seeing. Those larger shapes. Trying to keep in mind the light source as it comes in. It defines the area. A bit lighter of an area here. So it goes in and creates this little pool. You see? Just block that out a little bit. Just come down here. Okay, we got like this lighter area right here coming down. Beside that. This patch is getting a bit lighter. That patch is getting a bit lighter there. Lighter patch here. Wow, this thing's getting a little bit brighter still. Starting to get things a little bit more defined, which is good. Okay, my next step, I'm going to get a little bit more detailed. So let's get a new layer going. A lot of this in the study is really just about layering things on top of each other, getting more and more specific as you go. Now, you don't have to do it this way. If your goal was just to study the value composition, you could have stopped at step 1 and, taken what you needed from that and be done. You could stop at this step here. You just need to be specific and just take from the study what it is that you're wanting to learn, and you do not need to go any further than that if you do not want to. Now, if you're like me and you like to just really paint up a storm, you could go hog wild and go through the whole thing like I'm about to do, but it's not necessary. Okay, so we have that there. Let's start getting in a bit more the detail. There. Paint out these lines a bit more as we go through. Comes down into here. We have slightly darker sections of this mountain that are coming down, kind of another zigzaggy pattern. So I'm going to try to capture that as best I can. Goes down into here. Same with this. Take some creative liberties as you see fit if you need to. trying to get it to be perfect or exactly like the painting, but, you know, get close to it at least. The reason why I like to have my opacity down a bit is because as I'm layering things down, I like to color pick, or I guess value pick in the sense, to use in other areas. So I'm not having to constantly adjust this slider over here. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever it is you like. Still not really getting into the detail. I'm still just kind of very roughly, loosely getting in some of the aspects of this painting. Not really worrying too much about it being perfect or the texture, just the shapes. This goes down here. Going down this way. There'd be a bit of a tree line. Here, I'm just going to kind of scribble in the rough outline of the trees as they are going down. I'm just going to try to keep note of that. And we get a little bit brighter. The trees. See, at this point here, this is where I now care about the trees. Just trying to bring them in here at this point. Got some sections going off like this here. Let's bring this up. To that tree section. These rocks here, as they're coming down into that pool, or that little pond section here. Let's get some more shapes of the trees kind of blocked out over here. It's a little bit lighter. Going into the darker tree silhouettes. Some right here. Let's get It's kind of down. It's a bit brighter in certain areas. See that the water is quite a bit darker as it gets towards the middle, where the light isn't hitting it as much. So this mountain peak ever so slightly. To this focal area, the light sections you can see. Studies are not necessarily meant to take like a long time, but at the end of the day, it's whatever is best for you to learn. So you take as long or as little as you need to make sure that you learn what it is you're trying to learn. Don't worry about the time that it takes you. Especially at the beginning of doing studies, it's probably going to take you a lot longer, and that is okay. Your goal is just to learn. Section up just a little bit as it gets over there. little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more. This guy's probably just a slight bit darker. Here we go. Probably about that dark. Doing things in value first before trying to get into color will really help you out when it comes to adding color to your work. Color often gets a lot of the credit that value brings to the table. If you're ever wondering why your colors are not working, they seem muddy or just not at all what you intend, try making sure your values are worked out first before you try adding any color. And I would say that this section here, probably as is, could go a little bit further, I guess. But this is, I would say, pretty close to being good and done for the next, section in this study that we're doing, where we're not trying to get like a whole lot of detail in, but we're still trying to add more. We're trying to define the shapes of things a little bit more. Oh, and I should save my work. That would be important. Where's it going? Studies. All right, cool. Now I won't lose all that progress. All right, so the next step that we can go into with this is still keeping in values, but cleaning up what we have a little bit more. So we'll go on to a new layer. And, it's always good to check your progress and see how things are building up as you add on to the study layer by layer, get more and more detailed and such. Again, we started from the bottom, the value composition, the whale and the void, added a little bit more, start to define areas, added a little bit more to define that even more. So always just kind of take a look, analyze where you were, how far you've come. Now that we're going to get into more of the texture and defining, I'm going to go ahead and change brush, get more of a textured brush going. Do this one, I think. Yeah, we're going to do that one. So, get through. And I mean, honestly, from this point, I'm going to actually switch up my steps. Again, you don't have to do it this way. I'm going to actually do color over the top of this next. And then we'll get more into detailing and texture. So a quick and easy way to get color on top of value layer that you have is when you have a new layer on top of it, change that layer's properties to color. And then from there, you can just paint right over top of it. And in the color that you want, the hue that you want, it will change the color of the value and things that you're working on while still maintaining the value range or the difference in what you've painted underneath it. Not like this. So it's still maintaining everything, but it's just now I've got color over top of it. So I'm going to eyeball the color that I see in here and try to just, very lightly put it in the areas that I see. If you're having trouble with figuring out what color is being used, don't feel bad about color picking. Just be aware that, if you're looking at old paintings and stuff, computers are trying to simulate real life color and paintings. So it may not be correct, and you may notice that, whoa, there's a whole mass of different color in this one little section. So just kind of like pick one and go with it. Another thing that you can do is if you don't want to color pick and you just want to kind of eyeball it like I'm about to do, then I'm going to, let's say, start with, like the color here in this valley area. To me, that looks kind of like I'm going to close one eye and look at it. That kind of looks like a desaturated, kind of yellow. It looks a lot warmer to me than any green that is surrounding it. But I'm going to check that by choosing the color that I think it is, or that it's closest to, and then I'm going to paint right next to it, except I'm going to do it on a different layer because that was the color layer. Okay, normal layer, I'm going to paint right next to it, see if I'm close enough. Probably a little bit more saturated, a little bit brighter. Let's say that's close enough. Go back to my color layer and just start adding that on. I know that there is a gradient of things going on, so I can either A, not really worry about that right now, so I'm just quickly adding color on, or B, you can go into your brush settings, go to color dynamics, turn it on, change the hue jitter, saturation jitter, and it will add slight variations as you're painting through. I like to do this because I like having subtle variation in my saturation and my hues. I'm painting is closer to actual painting with traditional medium, but in a digital format. I'm going to keep it low, probably about 5%, and just kind of get in there with that. Paint in this area. Like, it's not going to be exact in every location that I'm going to put it down, and that is fine. I'm just trying to get the general color that I see. Okay, let's go for so no, that's probably still a yellow, a little bit brighter, I think. Maybe something kind of desaturated. Closer to green. There we go. Section here. Let's bring it to this area here, down. Let's see, these darker areas here are getting more into the green. Kind of dark. A little bit of a blue hue to it, so I'm actually going to get closer to blue. That's what it looks like to me. A little darker. A little less saturated. Closer to that, yeah. Just very quickly kind of paint this in. These trees over here are roughly the same kind of bluish green as we have on the opposite side. So I'm just going to block it in like that. And these back here kind of have a little bit of it. Dark. Go back to that kind of desaturated or halfway chroma yellow. Here. It's orange, I think. This in over here. Get to the lights. This is a lot more gray. It's got some bluish qualities to it. Actually, I think that's a bit warmer. Like this, a bit more gray. Tiny bit more gray, a little bit lighter. Painting and just kind of art in general is a lot about pushing and pulling what you're trying to work with. Push and give things a little bit more color, a little bit more of an angle, pull it back a little bit, just a back and forth kind of deal. That's a great thing about art. Just kind of having fun in that. Having fun in the learning how things look. I can get it to look a certain way. So these lighter areas, I might get a little bit more saturated oranges. So I think it's closer to this. My values actually weren't quite right here, so it's not going to look exactly how I want it to, but that's fine. We can correct it later. Let's go with clouds. A bit more blue going on in here. Let's see, that blue back there has some purple to it. Kind of looks like. Little desaturated purple. Saturated. Some indigo, I think. There. Spots. You can see the light kind of coming through and reflecting off of these bits of the clouds. So we know the light is warm. So we're going to use more of a yellow, more of an orange. Just kind of. Yep. we can see from the study that we're doing and what we're referencing, it's not exact, but that's okay. We're just learning. It's close, though. It's fairly close. Okay. So that was the color layer, so we'll go, like the base kind of color layer, we'll go another layer, top, and from here, we can start getting a little bit more specific in our texture and with what's going on. Change up my brush again. It's a good idea to change up your brushes if you're doing things like this, or just in general, especially if you're trying to get texture. If you're using one brush or the same brush throughout like an entire painting, it is going to, you're not going to have a really good contrast with the texture that you could add into things. Now, that's not saying that you have to do it that way. I mean, you can paint this kind of picture with just a simple hard round brush. It will just take you forever as you were trying to paint or like get in every single specific little detail. Whereas if you have a textured brush, you can kind of finagle it a little bit more. Take a sip of water. So we're getting more into the the nitty-gritty of the detail, of the color. And we see, got a new brush down. So let's just kind of go over and let's paint it in. I'm being fairly quick about it. I've got a brush here that automatically kind of adjusts its shape and size a little bit as I paint and lift off the canvas and come back down on it, which is great for just getting some variation in what I'm working on. These brushes are part of the Groot, G-R-U-T, by Nikolai Groot brush pack. You can look it up. I think they have a free kind of demo version that you can look at, as well as just being able to get the entirety of the brush pack. It's like 500 different brushes. They're all really good. I think it's like $20. So I'm not trying to get like super detailed. Finding things a little bit more. Again, I've got my brush settings on that color dynamics, so that way all my brush strokes have a little bit different jitter in hue and saturation as I go through, just to make it a little bit more interesting and diverse. So I would suggest that if you're trying to find or do something similar with your work, getting into this part of the study where I'm actually adding a lot more of the color And texture, it's good to just make sure that you are really analyzing, looking at what you're studying, trying to understand it. You'll notice if you ever watch people paint traditionally or do any sort of that thing, you'll oftentimes see painters step back from their work and kind of keep going back and forth between doing a little bit of work, stepping back, analyzing it, doing a little bit more, stepping back, analyzing it. That is just a good way to get the larger picture. See everything kind of from a overview. And check and see if what you're doing still reads well, if it's still going in the way that you want it to. I'm going to turn down my opacity a little bit again. Another thing that you can do when you move into color is if you have a layer above everything else, change that layer to color, take the paint bucket tool. You can either grab like pure black, pure white, and then just, paint bucket that entire color over the whole thing. Switch on and off to make sure that your values are still where they're supposed to be. I like to call that my BW filter. Spelled correctly, and then I just lock that layer. I keep it at the very top, and I just toggle it every so often just to make sure, again, that what I'm putting down is, staying within the value range that I'm wanting. Let's actually switch back to the paintbrush instead of the paint bucket. That would have been awkward. Spend as long or as little on these things as you want. Again, it's just about making sure you're learning what it is you set out to learn. Thank you, Kieran. Yeah, feel free to follow along. Later I'll be uploading this YouTube so you can take a look at it whenever is most convenient for you. Try not to use pure black as much as possible in when actually like getting into the color of things. I like to make sure that I have some color in the shadows and the darkness. It just makes it look a little nicer, in my opinion, and just gives it that much more of a pop to the color, which is what I like.
We'll be there soon. All of us. In the safety of the North.
Again, I'm kind of just stepping back and I'm taking a look, analyzing, evaluating what I got down on the canvas, going back into it. I don't care about getting every little detail. Get close. Strokes are kind of loose and quick. So I'm going through it. I don't need it to be supremely fast, or I don't need it to be like supremely stiff.
Thinking of what lies ahead, making real all the tales you have read. Your days out here are not.
Trying to get just the general shadow shapes of things without having to paint like every blade of grass, every branch, every leaf. As much as I can simplify the larger shapes or larger values, the better.
Every snowfall comes to rest. Each day will end in sunset. I know that your days will be gold. Before we fade as all of us grow old. Brand new footprints on this land. Touching colors with your
It's these darker kind of trees going through like this.
We look upon this new frontier with mountains far and rivers near. The wilderness, your playground.
Trying to keep in mind that as things get closer to us, a little bit more saturated, a bit darker. If you have any questions about the demo or like what specifically I'm doing to get like a certain texture going, feel free to ask. Always happy to answer. Oh, excuse me. At this point, it's pretty much getting to the, say, section of being done as far as what I was trying to do for the study. There are some little quick things that we can do to make some areas pop that we can see in the original painting and try to make that happen on our end as well. So what we'll do is, let's get a new layer down. I'm going to change that to a color dodge. We're going to grab an airbrush. Airbrush. Juve voice jump scare. Yeah. Just trying to keep you on your toes. We're going to grab an airbrush. Going to go about midway between kind of a warm color. And then we're just going to hit like certain areas here that we see are in the light, being hit most directly with the light. Sections here. That section. Here. Up here. Okay. Well, I think that's good for our painting study. We're coming up in about 2.5 hours. Trying to keep these study sections a little bit lighter, more focused than just regular painting sections, but I think we'll probably call it here. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions on anything. Just DM me, however you want. More than happy to answer. But thank you so much, everybody that joined. Appreciate y'all being here. Hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your Monday. We'll see you around. Bye-bye.